So I thought I'd just do a live thing to kind of go through a bit of Macbeth revision, since I've seen a lot of people kind of, freaking out. But yeah, yeah, absolutely, you can ask questions. So I thought firstly I'd go through my technique for when using the extract to get a wider picture when you're talking about the essay. So this one is an extract in an example booklet my teacher gave me that's asking about Lady Macbeth as a powerful woman and how far she's presented as that throughout the play. So what I do first is I go through the extract and I look at all the quotes and I think, what can I link this to out? Either what can I pick out first that links to the question, or what quote link out to the rest of the play. For my map making, I'd say go into direct topics. So I'll use the back of the sheet. So don't try and keep your topics too vague, because then you'll have too much information on one sheet. Go pick specific topics, so or specific characters or specific themes, and then annotate them and do multiple mind maps instead of trying to fit it all into one, because that will make your life a lot easier and be able to kind of look at it more. Also, I find it always easier to lay my mind maps out, so it got the middle bit, and then I more lay it out like a tree branching off, and then you have all the little branches like that going out, because these kind of curving shapes draw your eye more and points to where you need to go instead of just straight lines, and it's easier to kind of see which sections are smaller and going off. So that's kind of what I do for that. Anyway, I was gonna go through this. So what I've done here, so I've looked through this extract, and so it's about Lady Macbeth being a powerful woman. So I've first picked out on this possessive pronoun here of my, and this use of this possessive pronoun clearly demonstrates that Lady Macbeth believes that the castle is hers and that she owns it, which in both Jacobean times and when the play is set would have been something quite unheard of, because you wouldn't have women owning property. So this shows that she believes in that. You could also link this to dearest partner in greatness, and how Macbeth views her as an equal, which was also an undercut of the times and how women were viewed. So that would be a really good quote to link out of the extract with. Over here, I haven't actually annotated that, but I did draw off it. Unsex me here, that's really important in this, talking about powerful women, because of course she's asking to be less of a woman and become stronger, so she can convince her husband to murder the king. So you could view this as two ways. You could either view this that she's being very powerful because she understands her placement in society and wants to rise above it, or you could view it maybe that she isn't such a powerful woman and that's why she needs to be unsexed. You can also, then the next one I picked out was make thick my blood. A really good thing to talk about here. I'm from Hampshire, so South England, in like the very, very South England, so almost close to the Isle of Wight. Year 11. Anyway, a good thing to pick up with blood with Macbeth, especially in this passage, is that blood is a symbol of fertile womanhood. So that is a really important thing to pick up in terms of this question about being a woman, because it means that Lady Macbeth is asking to be a stronger woman. So you could make that as an opposite argument to the unsex me here. So that make thick my blood this demonstrates that she really is asking to be a stronger woman. She wants to be a stronger woman and have that symbol of womanhood be thicker and greater, so she can help her husband murder the king. The next one I picked out was Come Thick Night, and I thought this one was interesting because it has a lot of echoes of the later soliloquy Lady Macbeth has, well, not soliloquy, the later scene Lady Macbeth has, where she is so fearful of the dark after her guilt has eaten up at her. So she has to have a light by her, and she's terrified. And I also picked out the smoke of hell, and how that definitely can fit to the quote, "Hell is murky." So that would be a really good link to the rest of the play and get you those marks. But also you could look at the whole thing holistically, which would also give you more marks. And the final one I picked out, I didn't end up using this because I made a little essay plan down here, which I'll go through in a minute. I didn't end up using that in this, but I picked out that my keen knife see not the wound it makes. And this is her need not to feel guilt. So you could reference that, you could link that to the bloody business, a little water will wash us off of this deed. There are so many quotes you could link that to, because Lady Macbeth has this need not to feel guilt in order to be a powerful woman. She sees herself as, if she feels that guilt, she's not powerful. And that's exactly what happens to her in the end of the play, where she feels so much of this guilt that she is no longer has any power. And I thought that was really interesting to look at. The most important thing when looking at an extract is to only pick out a few points, because I could pick out so much from this extract. So I could look at the whole woman's breasts and the milk, and that would be interesting to talk about. I could talk about the stop up the access passage to remorse. I could talk about the raven and the symbolism of that. There are so many things you could talk about in this passage, but you just do not have the time in your English essay. You've only got to pick out a couple of key points that you know you can write about. And that's what I'm going for here. So I picked the ones that I think I could link to the rest of the play really well. So if we go down here, I've made a little essay plan on how I would write this essay if I were to do it. So for my intro, what I'm looking at as a whole, so what you initially want to look at is, what point are you trying to make with your essay? So looking at the question, what would be your answer to it? So for me, I think that how far Shakespeare presents Lady Macbeth as a powerful woman. She's initially a very powerful woman on equal footing with men. She's plotting regicide. She's got all this. She's got all this agency. She's extremely powerful. But she's extremely powerful. But I'm lost my train of thought there. She's extremely powerful, but as soon as her guilt starts taking over her, it reduces her to a powerless state of being, and you can track this throughout the play, and this is what I thought for this. So in my first paragraph, I talk about the initial powerfulness, so the whole dearest partner in greatness and under my battlements make thick my blood, all these really good quotes that go through, and all these really good quotes that all these really good quotes that go through and talk about how Lady Macbeth is on equal footing with the men. You can sprinkle in some context there about the role of women in society. You can talk about how the equal footing's weird. You can talk about a bit of the supernatural with her spirits. So there's a lot of stuff you can talk about there. And that would be my first paragraph, and I would talk about that first. Then I thought my second paragraph would be after the event of the murder, you can actually track Lady Macbeth becoming more powerless throughout the play. And my favourite quote to use for this is I used this in an essay about Lady Macbeth and Macbeth's marriage once, and it's the "Be innocent of the knowledge, Chuck." And this is really interesting because you can compare this to how in the beginning of the play, Macbeth refers to her as dearest partner in greatness, and then refers to her as Chuck, which is clearly a much more demeaning name, and shows how much power she's lost due to Macbeth's power and gain. And you can also see, and this also is the guilt tracking her as well. But this could be Shakespeare's commentary on how as soon as men have used the women for power, they discard them, and the more powerful men will replace the powerful women. So it could be a commentary on that, and that's really interesting. You also have the how be innocent, the knowledge chuck. It has a lot of echoes of the whole look like the innocent flower but be the serpent under it, and you can do lots of links to that, and how that could be Macbeth stealing her line. You could the word innocent has lots of connotations. It's a really good quote to use, and that would be in my second paragraph. My third paragraph is how about the guilt destroying her. So the whole come thick night to needs a light all the time with her. Done is smoke of hell to hell is murky. This whole idea that this guilt and this power that Macbeth's gained has destroyed her on the inside and made her just unable to function. And it's taken her from this place of power to this place of just deep regret. And that's so I don't think she's an incredibly powerful woman, but in the beginning she was, and I think this is Shakespeare's commentary on that fact. So that's what I'd write about in my conclusion. For a conclusion quote for this, I would probably use hi Bonnie. I'm talking about Macbeth, so I'm not sure how helpful this would be to you. And that's what I talk about in my conclusion. So it's all about just using the extract to track where you want to go with your essay, and then my normal paragraphs that I use are an intro, 3 paragraphs, and then a conclusion, because that's just it's a timekeeping that I've always worked for me. It's a number of paragraphs that's always worked for me in English, and yeah. So that would be how I would tackle an essay for Macbeth. And you can literally apply to this to any essay. You just make sure you know your quotes, especially the famous ones. And you go through each extract, and you pick out ones that are relevant to the question it's asking. And you pick out ones that you can link to the rest of the play, like I have here. And that will allow you to approach it holistically. And it will get you higher marks, get you into higher grade boundaries, and show that you know the text really well. And that will just up all your marks in terms of the thing. So yeah, that would be my quick guide on how to go through Macbeth essay and how to tackle that. And you can literally apply this to Jekyll and Hyde as well, or whatever 19th century or Shakespeare you're doing. I always say go through that extract, pick out those quotes that are gonna get you to the rest of the story. I've kind of gone through Macbeth there, and I feel like Macbeth doesn't really need too many on the key quotes aspects because, well, it's very famous. So what I've done here is Jekyll and Hyde, and for Jekyll and Hyde, I made myself a quick key quotes card with quotes that I thought could be applied to any essay, because the good thing about the English exam is you could probably write a model essay that could apply to anything. I use the same quotes half the time because they're the ones I remember, and you can normally apply them to pretty much anything. I've separated them up into chapters. I can just go through all of them now and try and explain why I picked them. So my first one is actually I have one that isn't on here that I would recommend you have as well. It's the door was equipped with neither bell nor knocker, and that's a really good quote to have because it links to the whole secrecy aspect. It's the motif of doors, which are really prevalent throughout Jekyll and Hyde in terms of shutting people away. You can link that quote to loads of stuff like my door is shut even to you, people locking doors in any scenario. That's a really good quote to use. Anyway, the first one here is it wasn't like a man. The reason I picked this one up is because of this pronoun here, it. The use of this is said by Enfield when he's describing to Utterson him seeing Hyde trample a young girl. And the use of the it means that he hasn't even spoken to Hyde, he's barely met him, but even he at that point sees him as not a creature, not a human, he's a creature. The it dehumanises Hyde, and that's a really good quote to use in terms of that. The second quote kind of has the same content with the like some damned juggernaut. In this quote you can pick up on both the damned in terms of the Christian values of the time in the Victorian era, So he already believes that Hyde is sinning, and you can talk about that a lot in terms of those values. And the whole juggernaut thing, and how a juggernaut is an articulated lorry, and it's something cold and unfeeling, and it's once again going towards that whole inhuman aspect to Hyde, and that's a really good quote to use for that. My third quote from chapter 1 that I picked out was really like Satan, and once again this allows you to look at the Christian values of the time in Victorian England, and this will get you your AO3 context marks. So once again, Enfield hasn't met Hyde at this point. He's just watched him in this incident, and already he's judging him to be really like Satan, the ultimate epitome of sin in this society. So that would be a really good quote to pick out, and then you can talk about all the connotations that comes from Satan. So how he the embodiment of sin, of human wrongdoing, and this whole idea that anything sinful in Victorian society needs to be repressed and kept away. So that would be a really good one for there. One more that I haven't put on here that I really should have is at the end of chapter 1, where they talk about, where Enfield says to Utterson, "Let us make a bargain never to speak of this again." Now this is your golden quote in terms of AO3, talking about the repression of Victorian society, because Enfield realises that in Enfield's eyes, even speaking about someone doing these unlawful acts is going to hurt their reputation, and they're never going to speak of it again. So this is that's a really good quote to use when you're talking about AO3 and Victorian repression. My chapter 2 doesn't have too much to it, but there's lots more quotes you could pick out, but the one I really wanted to pick out from chapter 2 was "The figure haunted the lawyer all night." And this is mainly because of the figure aspect, because the whole idea of Hyde being referred to as a figure really dehumanises him and makes him seem like something primal and evil, and it just adds to that whole air. So if you have anything on Hyde, pick up on these inhuman pronouns that he's described with, because they are really important. Another one I would pick up from chapter 2 would be the whole expression of deformity that Utterson describes Hyde with, because this unspoken sense of deformity is the reason that Utterson is so repelled by Hyde, and it also shows that it's not under any rational level, but it's more this primal level of something is wrong with this man that's really making Utterson be repelled from him. For chapter 3, the ones I picked up on, so chapter 3 is a lot about Jekyll and his character, so you get a lot of quotes from that about that. So two that I really picked up on that I thought could work in any essay would be Slysh Cast and Scientific Heresies. Slysh Cast shows how Jekyll has this, even though he's a doctor, he's an upstanding man, he's an upstanding citizen, this whole idea of Slysh Cast shows that he has got this other side to him, and that can link to Victorian repression in their society. It can link to so much. It's really Slysh Cast is really a good one, talking about Jekyll's character in terms of him already having the side to him even when he is Jekyll and not Hyde, because the whole idea of Victorian society was the whole idea of Victorian society was to repress all your sin, to repress all these things that were viewed as wrong, and not tell anyone about them even if you did them. And we can see this in the first chapter as well, when Enfield doesn't state where he's coming from, just that it's somewhere at the end of the world, which really shows that he was probably doing something very wrong, but he's not going to talk about it because that would ruin his reputation. The second one I picked up from chapter 3 would be Scientific Heresies. Now, this is a great one because this is Lanyon talking about Jekyll's work. Lanyon is a devout Christian, and he views Jekyll's work as a heresy, something against God, something unnatural. And this is a theme throughout the book of science versus religion, and how far do you push it, and what's against God and what's not. And it's this whole idea of Jekyll's work being something wrong and sinful, which you can link back to Victorian repression, you can link back to Christian values. There's so much you can get out of that. And it also demonstrates how Langan's character, he is at odds with himself, because he is both a scientist and a Christian, which would seem to be two things that wouldn't go together. And in Victorian times, it's another AO3 point you can really pick up on. In Victorian times, it was recently that Charles Darwin published his Origin of the Species, which really challenged their Christian values, because it was evolution and that was not what the Bible taught. So this was a time where Christian values were being challenged by science, and that's something you can really pick up on. We're moving on to chapter 4 now, and of course the main event chapter 4 is the murder of Sir Danvers Carew by Hyde. This chapter is a goldmine for your Hyde being a creature or devolved or atavistic nature. So that's kind of what I picked up on here. So the first one I picked up on was broke out in a great flame of anger. This is great because it has this verb of broke, which comes back again here, and I'll link that to that later. But this whole great flame of anger is just great imagery for how it's sudden and unnatural, and it's linked to that fire, because fire is something that burns and takes and is uncontrollable, and that's what this similar metaphor is trying to say about Hyde. Then the second one I picked up on is just a good one for contrast. If you're talking about how Sir Danvers Carew is pictured as an innocent against Hyde's evil, so old world kindness is just a really good quote for that. You could also pick up on the fact that he's got silver hair, and that colour difference is really good for symbolism. By the way, anyone, feel free to ask any questions if you feel like I'm going too fast or saying something you don't understand. Now we get to this one. This is possibly one of the most important quotes you could get out of this, because it is a goal. You could write a whole paragraph on this quote alone, because it's brilliant. So it's this verb right here that we're looking at. Hyde broke out of all bounds. So firstly, that links to this one here, this breaking. It's a very violent verb. It shows that you were kind of constrained before, and he's forcibly pushing something and breaking it. And the fact that it's talking about all bounds could have a lot of things. It could be both physical, so the literal restraints he kind of has on him in terms of his physicality, because Hyde is quite short, and it's described as quite short very often. And it could also be metaphorically the bounds of society, the bounds that society places on people, and how they're not expected to act. They're always expected to act in a prim and proper way. No violence, none of this. It's meant to be that. And so these bounds are really good. You can get into loads of metaphors in terms of that being Victorian society and how he breaks out of them. So that's a really good one there. The last one I picked up for chapter 4 would be ape-like fury. Now this is just a good one for AO3 in terms of the fact that ape-like fury has connotations of evolution and atavism. Atavism is the process of atavism is the process of being reverted back to a more primitive state. So ape-like fury suggests that Hyde is becoming more primal in this attack. He's becoming more and more like his ancestors in this primitive state, and you can pick up on your AO3 marks here by referencing Charles Darwin and the Origin of the Species, and how Victorians were very afraid of this reversion back to a more primitive state, and could that just happen to someone? Could someone suddenly revert back to being a monkey? Atavism is spelt, I'm going to get a blank piece of paper so I can quickly jot that down. If anyone missed, because I was going through Macbeth earlier, if anyone missed that and would like me to go over that again, I can, or I'll probably post this live stream so people can watch it. So atavism, so that's how you spell atavism. And if you want to talk about it as like an atavistic nature, so sorry, we can't read my writing, it's awful. And that would be, so it's either atavism is like the noun, and then atavistic is the adjective. No problem. So just pop that away. So ape-like fury, it represents a lot of that fear of the time, of becoming more primal, and shows that Hyde is indeed fulfilling this. It also could show how Hyde is the broken off part of Jekyll that is primal, maybe showing that all of us have this inside us and we could all become this. So very Lord of the Flies-esque in that terms. So we move on to chapter 5. Chapter 5, so this is when Jekyll becomes very ill, and Utterson is very confused by this because he doesn't know what's going on with his friend, obviously. So the ones I picked up for this would be dingy windowless structure. I picked this one because it's a good one for environment reflecting mood. So the fact that Jekyll resides in a dingy windowless structure demonstrates how he is closed off from the world. You can't see what's happening with him. So that means that he's being closed off, he's hiding, his secrecy. If you get anything on secrecy, look at doors and look at structures, because they will really help you, because they're constant motifs throughout this story about how people hide away. Sense of Strangeness is one I picked up just because it's a good AO2 in terms of its sibilant alliteration and how the sound creates this very sinister sound. So if you say sense of strangeness, it sounds sinister. It just has this underlying connotation of sinister. And I picked this one out as just kind of like a regular old, if you're going through and you want to pick out a quote, go for it, because it's one that just works if you're saying, oh yeah, this is what happens to Jekyll, who becomes deadly sick. So that was just one I picked out for that. In terms of chapter 6, this is another one I picked out just for your like AO1 placing where you are quotes. Alright, but the second one in this one is what I really want to talk about. So if you hear anything else, that's my windows open and we just had a massive rainstorm. So he had his death warrant written legibly upon his face. Now this is talking about Dr. Lanyon, and no one knows this at the time because of course we don't understand what happens to Lanyon until we read his narrative in chapter 9. But this is just a really good metaphor to show how much this has affected Lanyon. The fact that you can actually see on his face that he is going to die. It's like someone signed it away and sealed it off. He's going to die. So that's a really good one for that. Same with deep-seated terror of the mind. It just shows that seeing this transformation has affected Lanyon so much that in his mind, on a mental level, he is terrified. He's just unnerved. He can't deal with it. And then same thing with Lanyon declared himself a doomed man. These are all just really good quotes if you want to talk about how much the transformation affected Lanyon before his death. So now we're going to... oh, hello, welcome. Now we're going to chapter 7. So this is the incident at the window. And this is, of course, where Enfield and Utterson see Jekyll transform without him wanting to transform at the window. So this is a really important chapter in the story. So so the one I picked up here, so a look of abject terror and despair. So that just shows this face that Jekyll pulls as he feels himself about to transform. It shows how much he fears the transformation at this point. It shows how much he's not willing in this transformation. He does not want to become Hyde anymore, and it's the abject. You can go into your AO2 marks talking about the use of the word abject and how that just shows that it's utter terror. it's this look, and it's so haunting that it froze the very blood of the gentleman. So this just shows Utterson and Enfield's reaction to that. So this is just a look that Jekyll has in his face, but it manages to make Utterson and Enfield so scared that it freezes their blood. You can talk about the connotation of blood and how it's something violent, but also very something personal, something inside you. So you could talk about how this is on a very biological, primal level, that these men are scared by how Jekyll looks and how his face is appearing. The next one I want to talk about is premature twilight. So this whole scene is set at twilight, which is really important because it's a pathetic fallacy. A pathetic fallacy is just a term for when the environment reflects what's happening in the story. So in this case, twilight is the transition from day to night. It's the middle ground. And Jekyll is currently in the middle ground between Hyde and himself. He can't stop transforming. It's all about transformation and how it links to that. So you could talk about how this sets the scene and creates this mood of transformation. And the use of the word premature shows how he is prematurely transforming into Hyde. It's not something that he wants to do. It's not something that should be happening right now, but it is. Hello, welcome. So that's premature twilight. It's really good when you're talking about pathetic fallacies. The next one I want to pick up on is disconsolate prisoner in this chapter, because it shows how just having this secret and having these sins weighed upon him and having this other half has made Jekyll a prisoner in his own home. He is trapped by his secrets, and that's something really good if you get an essay on secrecy and how it affects Jekyll on a personal level, because it traps him. It makes him a prisoner both physically in his own home and metaphorically in his mind, in his being. And this final one is just talking about how a glimpse had been sufficient, and so just the glimpse of Jekyll's face before he slams the window is enough to terrify Utterson and Enfield so much that they immediately leave, and they just can't even express what they're talking about. So it's that whole idea of a very glimpse of insufficient. Moving on to chapter 8 now. Chapter 8. Now this, of course, is the last night. So this is arguably, you could say, the climax of the story, since the last two chapters are just letters. So the first one I wanted to pick up was a pale moon lying on her back as if the wind had tilted her. This is once again a pathetic fallacy, showing how nature has been disturbed on this night. It's unnatural. It's being tilted, yeah? So the world itself is in an unnatural state at this point. A moon is also a trope of Gothic literature. This will get you your AO3 marks if you pick up on this, and how this instantly sets the mood as something evil and scary and something just dark, and it sets the tone for the rest of the chapter. As such does flecked blood into the face. Of course, we know that they aren't actually having blood flecked into their face when they go into the wind. This is Utterson and Poole when they're going to Jekyll's house, because Poole fears something. He fears whoever is in the laboratory, because he knows it's not Jekyll. So the mention of blood has connotations of this violent, this dangerous aspect to the whole scenario. The whole idea of once I heard it weeping, it's this it pronoun that we're picking up on again. So the pronoun of it, once again, dehumanises Hyde. Because we know it's Hyde in Jekyll's lab at this point. Sorry. And so this whole pronoun of it is what we're really picking up on here, this dehumanising. The weeping as well is really interesting, because it shows that whatever is in there, whether it be Hyde, Jekyll, or a mix of the two, it's sad, it's upset, it's broken by what is currently happening to it. And that's really important there. The chords of his face still moved with a semblance of life, but life was quite gone. This is a great quote, and I love this quote because you can pick up on loads of words in it. Firstly, the chords of his face still moved. this is just beautiful because it has this connotations of puppetry, and like he's being controlled, like whatever this creature is, it's being controlled by something else, whether that be sin, whether that be primal urges, it's being controlled, and it has that connotations, and it also makes it more creepy. The whole idea of the semblance of life, but life was quite gone. So it's this whole idea that he still looks alive, he's still being controlled, and he still looks alive, but he's no longer alive. And that whole idea, it's very creepy, it's very gothic, and you can talk about that loads. The really one to pick up here is on the chords of his face, though, because you get that great metaphor. Of course, then we move on to chapter 9, and this is Dr. Lanion's letter. So this is where he talks about seeing Hyde transform into Jekyll, and this is the reason it kills him. So the first one I want to talk about here is greed of curiosity. Now this is really interesting because this isn't Lanyon talking to Hyde, this is Hyde talking to Lanyon. And he's saying that Lanyon, even though Lanyon likes to paint himself as this pious man who wouldn't go too far for science and keeps his Christian values, he still has that greed. His greed of curiosity is the reason he dies, because he's told he can leave and he doesn't have to do his transformation, but he does, and that's why he dies. The second one I like to look at here is just this description of the transformation, because it's really creepy and eerie. The features seem to melt. This shows the whole Jekyll transforming to Hyde. It's not jarring or painful, it's not breaking bones, it's melting, it's smooth. So all the parts that make up Jekyll also make up Hyde, and same. So they're not complete separations, they are just different aspects of Jekyll. They melt into each other, and that's really important. So now we move on finally to chapter 10. We're almost done, guys. So what I like to talk about in chapter 10, of course, because this is Jekyll's narrative, where he describes the whole case and what happened and all that. The really good stuff in this chapter is Jekyll talking about what made him want to do this and what forced him into this. So we start off with tortured with the frozen longings. This word tortured is what you really want to pick up on, because this shows that the society of repression that Jekyll was under, and the need to express himself and commit these so-called sins, was torturing him. It was painful. He was trapped by it. The second one I want to talk about is ordinary secret sinner. The word ordinary implies that there are many secret sinners, and Jekyll is just one of them in this society. This will get you your AO3 marks when you talk about Victorian repression, and how even though Jekyll went to the extreme lengths to separate himself, all Victorians actually do this just on a metaphorical level rather than a physical one. So that's something you can really pick up on there. And the word sinner, of course, gives you your Christian values and all that. The brute that slept within, that's just a really good one about how this brute of Hyde is inside Jekyll all along. It's not something that he creates, it's there all along. He just gave it a separate physical form. And the final one, the most important quote arguing the whole thing: man is not truly one. Hello. Man is not truly one, but truly two. This is, of course, the full statement of duality, which is possibly the main theme you could argue in this book. It's the whole idea that Jekyll believes, this is his belief, that everyone has two parts themselves. Everyone has this other side, whether they are unrespectable and they actually have a respectable side, or whether they're respectable and they have this sinful side within them. And you can track this, you can link this quote to so many moments throughout the whole book. So you can link it to Enfield coming from the ends of the earth at the beginning of the book. You can link it to Utterson drinking alone and locking the door whenever he feels like he's doing something wrong. You can link it to all the people in the back streets of Soho. You can link it to so many aspects of people doing what they feel is wrong and hiding it. It's this whole thing of people having two sides, and that's arguably, that's so that you could end your essay with that. You could add that in so many essays, so that's always a good one to remember. And there we have it. So that would be me going through what I think are some of the key quotes you'd have to look at when you're studying Jekyll and Hyde if you're writing an essay on it, because I feel like these quotes could apply to literally anything. So of course there are more quotes you can learn, there are more ones that apply to specific essays, but remember, you will get an extract for Jekyll and Hyde, so you'll be able to pick a few more out of that, and they might remind you of a couple more you could go through. So but these are the ones I feel like could apply to any essay. If anyone would like me to photograph and send these cards to them, I'd be really happy to. Just send me a DM. And that's kind of what I want to go through there. So I've gone through Macbeth and I've gone through Jekyll and Hyde a bit. Is there anything else you'd like me to go through? Just because, I've got notes, I've got study things. I'll absolutely send the notes to you. I'll take some photographs and send them to you. So anything else you'd like me to go through while I'm here? Because otherwise I will end and get some more notes done. But I just thought I'd go through a bit of Macbeth and Jekyll and Hyde. And if you want to see the Macbeth, if you didn't join in time for that, it will be but I could go through a bit more Macbeth if you wanted now. But yeah, I will say this was a revision guide my teacher gave me for Macbeth, and I found it really helpful. So earlier in this live stream I went through I can find it. So this has all the context in it, character analysis, and a couple of example extracts. So the one I went through earlier was this one about Lady Macbeth being a powerful woman, and basically what I do for this, any extract in anything, Jekyll and Hyde, Macbeth, the works, I just pick out stuff. I pick out things that I think could link to the rest of the play, book, whatever it is, and then I pick out stuff that links to the question. So that was kind of what I went through earlier, but so I think I'm probably done here. If anything else last minute? If not, I think I will end here. Thank you very much for, when I say that. So thank you very much for anyone who joined me during this live stream. It's it is actually very useful to revise by talking about it. I really hope this helped you. And thank you very much for joining me. Bye.